What's up everyone, and welcome to the ultimate guide to hard ops and box cutter. So this course is meant to focus exclusively on these two add-ons, how to utilize them, how to use them, and actually make your workflow and hard surface a lot more efficient. Now I do want to mention that hard ops and box cutter get updated very frequently, usually every few weeks, so this course is bound to change. Some things you see in this course might be slightly different in the future. With that being said, we'll try to keep the big important functionalities up to date, but there's just going to be some big changes that will definitely be happening at some point. So although the fundamentals will remain the same with these add-ons, there might be a few different tools and buttons that might be moved around, or perhaps a new tool might be introduced. So just keep that in mind. Box cutter and hard ops get updated a lot, but this course should still be a good overview for most of the versions to come. And quickly, I'm going to discuss the structure. So the first section of this course is going to be showcasing how to use these add-ons. Now, it seems like it's a quick and easy tool to learn. It's not. It's going to take some time, so I don't know how many hours this first part is going to be, but we're going to go through all of the essential tools, as well as some of the tools that I don't use too much but might be useful to you. So that's going to be the first part of the course, and the second part of the course is going to be taught by Ryu, my Blender Bros partner, and what we're going to be doing, or what he's going to be doing rather, is create a cool looking sci-fi Land Rover using everything I teach you in this section. So basically it goes from learning the tools to utilizing them, and I think you'll be able to learn the most by doing it this way. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started and hop right into hard ops and box cutter. So the first tool I want to discuss is Sharpen, and the best way to demonstrate the Sharpen tool is to use a cylinder. So I'm going to add in a cylinder here. And usually in vanilla Blender, you'd have to smooth it out by simply right-clicking Shade Smooth and then going over here to the Auto Smooth panel. So what Sharpen does is it does all of this in one click. So instead of having to go to Smooth and then Auto Smooth, which is two different clicks, all you have to do is press the Q key and then click on Sharpen and you're done. Now this is the base functionality of Sharpen. It does quite a bit more, which I'll discuss right now. So first of all, whenever you sharpen, you'll get a panel down here called Hop Sharpen. And the first one, the default one, is S Sharp. We're going to focus on this one first. So basically what S Sharp does is it applies a sharpen and keeps all the modifiers in your stack. So if you have like booleans going on, none of the booleans will be applied, they'll stay in. And I'll demonstrate this real quick. We haven't discussed box cutter yet, but just bear with me for now. So maybe you have, a few booleans in here or something, right? So if I just were to go in here and sharpen it, the booleans stay in the stack. Maybe I'll put a bevel as well. But if you were to use the C Sharpen tool right here, it'll actually apply the booleans and keep the bevel. So the main focus right now is really just on S Sharp. That's the one I use most of the time, and that's the default one. So you're also going to have an auto smooth angle here, which you can adjust. This value right here is the same exact value as what's in the normal auto smooth panel. If you adjust it in here, it's going to reflect in here, or vice versa. So as you can see, you can adjust the auto smooth angle in here or in here. Only issue I've noticed is that if you adjust it in here, it won't actually update down here, but it's still going to actually apply that to the mesh, so don't worry about it. Now we also have a setting here called sharpness, and this is a very useful one as well. So Sharpen by default allows you to add in any of the four big sharpening options. Those four being bevel weight, sharp, seam, and crease. You're going to notice if I sharpen this and then tab into edit mode, actually as a matter of fact I'm going to go ahead and apply the boolean, so this is a good time to use the C Sharpen option. You can also do C Sharpen by control clicking on the sharp, does the same thing. This is a good example. If you want to apply your booleans, you can simply use the C Sharp option to quickly apply those. Not too much difference besides that. Anyways, now if I go into edit mode, you're going to see these booleans are applied, and we also have some sharps marked around the harsher edges. And the reason this is being marked on the more harsh edges is because of this angle threshold. When we sharpen, you're going to see we have a sharpness angle. And this is very useful because in vanilla Blender you can't mark sharps and bevel weights and creases and things like that based off of an angle. You have to do it manually. So without hard ops, you'd actually have to go in here and go around to these harsher edges and mark them manually, whereas with hard ops, basically a one-click ordeal. Now you can also adjust the sharpness angle. If I were to make this super low, like 1 degrees, and sharpen it, you're going to see now we have a sharp marked around all these edges because that angle threshold is way too low. Likewise, if I go too high on it, like 180 or something, you're going to see we're not going to really have anything marked. I guess we need to clear this out. But yeah, if I were to use like 180 degrees, you're going to see in this case we won't really have anything marked. In general, 30 degrees captures just about everything you need. I never really changed this option too much, but that is basically what it does if you ever want to adjust the sharpen angles. Now by default, if we press the Control-tilde hotkey on the keyboard, you're going to have an option for your sharps. Let me also move the screencast keys over a bit. So yeah, if you press Control-tilde, you're going to see we have sharp options in here. By default, it applies a bevel weight and a sharp, as you can see here. If I were to alt-click on this set of edges here, you're going to see not only do we have a bevel weight applied, but we also have a sharp applied. If I were to remove this, you're going to see the sharpen is still there. It just, you know, it can't display every single type of sharp we have there, so sometimes the color might override, but it doesn't mean the other options aren't there. So by default, you know, you have these two, but you can also apply a crease and a seam as well based off of the sharpness threshold if you want to. So for example, if you wanted to add in a seam and a crease, maybe you're doing some sort of subsurf modeling or want to separate based off of the harsher angles, you can come in here, turn these two on, sharpen again, and now you're going to see now we have not only a seam applied, but also a bevel weight, a crease, and a sharp applied. Now I don't use these two too much unless I'm doing like subsurf or need to have some areas separated, but these are options if you ever need to turn them on. So that's really about it for Sharpen. It's super easy to understand, and it's one tool that you're going to be using a lot, usually the first setting you use in any sort of hard surface model. There are also a few options which, I mean, you can go through here and take a look at. C#, the only real difference in this one is that you can also adjust which modifiers you want to have applied. So for example, if I had like a solidify modifier applied for whatever reason, I know this is going crazy, but just bear with me. You can also make it so that if you go to C#, the solidify modifier will also be applied, as you can see here. And you can adjust most of these, but in general, I just leave the Boolean and the solidify on. But if you wanted mirror and array to be applied, you could actually turn those on as well. So for example, if I had a mirror, I'll go ahead and run a mirror, which we'll discuss in a few videos. But say I had a mirror applied on here, right? You can see it in the stack. By default, if you use C#, it doesn't apply the mirror, but if I were to turn this on, it's actually going to apply the mirror, which can be pretty useful. So mess around with those. If you ever need to change the settings, you're more than welcome to do so. That's basically all the S-sharpen and C-sharpen options do. The one final sharpening option is the clean sharp option, which I basically never use. But if you wanted to absolutely remove everything, all your modifiers, all your sharps and things like that, you just go over to this panel right here. It's going to remove your modifiers and also remove any sort of sharpenings that you have on the mesh here. I don't really know a practical use case in which I'd actually use that, but at least it's there if I ever need it. So that's about it for Sharpen. Super easy concept to understand, and we'll be using it a ton in hard surface modeling. Alright, so let's discuss Bevel then, shall we? So Bevel is super easy to understand. It adds in a bevel, right? So all we have to do is press the Q key and then bevel. And if we scroll left or right with the mouse button, you can see this kind of adjusts the width, or the offset of the bevel rather. And you can increase the segment count as well by scrolling up, or decrease it by scrolling down. Generally what I do is use around 3 segments and press the N key to harden the normals and just give it a very slight bevel around the edges. The nice thing about bevels and hard ops is that it automatically applies a smooth and an auto smooth to it, whereas in Vanilla Blender you'd have to go in here, right click to shade it smooth, and then go over here to the auto smooth panel. So it does this all at once for you whenever you add in a bevel. So sometimes you can completely skip the sharpening step for that reason. There's really not too much to say about the bevel option in hard ops. It's one of the most well-known ones and probably the easiest to use. So there are a few different bevel options. If you hover over it, you can add in a new bevel with a 30-degree threshold. So sometimes I'll do that. Say for example I scroll down and run a chamfer instead. Let me also run a sharpen so that way it has a harsh edge there. So sometimes what I'll do is have a chamfer in here, and then what I want to do is add in an additional bevel, so I have one here controlling the chamfer, and then I want an additional bevel around the edges of the chamfer. So what you can actually do is go in here and control click to add in one with a 30-degree threshold, and add in an additional layer like that. And you can also do the same thing with a 60-degree threshold if that's what you need, so control shift clicking will do that. And if you shift click, you can actually ignore the scale application, because by default, whenever you run a bevel in HardOps, it will apply the scale automatically. Now, I personally never use the bypass scale option just because usually I want to have a uniform bevel, but there might be a reason you want to have a more biased bevel, in which case you could shift click on the bevel modifier, and that's going to actually ignore the scale. I never really use that one though. So in general, you're just going to be going in here and clicking on the bevel and adding one in and pretty much being done with it. But maybe in a case like this where you have two different bevel modifiers, right? One for the chamfer and one for the actual bevel, you might want to scroll through and adjust one bevel over the other. So right now, the only bevel being adjusted is the current active bevel, but maybe I want to adjust the other bevel. All you have to do is hold control and scroll up, and that'll go to the other bevel, and then control and scroll up again, and you can simply switch between the two. Also, harden normals is a pretty popular option to kind of ease the smoothing on the bevel. So if you want to harden the normals, what you can do is press the N key to do that. And also, if you press the H key, you'll see a massive list of help options in here. In general, I don't use most of these, but if you want to find a functionality, all you have to do is press the H key and then take a look. So in general, for these bevels, all you're really going to do is end up clicking on bevel, running a bevel, and then being done with it. But there are a few options you might want to adjust, such as the limit method. You can press the L key to adjust the limit method. You can also scroll up or scroll down to adjust the segment count, and you can also press the A key for angle to adjust the angle and find the ideal location for it. Those are about the only three I really use in terms of the bevel settings, but there are some quick ones in here you can kind of scroll through and mess with if you press the H key. So there you go, that's the bevel modifier, and I think you'll find this one quite useful. It's going to be one of the most popular ones you use inside of HardOps. Alright, now let's discuss the array options inside of HardOps. So usually if you do an array, you go into the array modifier, right? And then you choose the axis, you adjust the factor or offset, and then you adjust the count. Now this one's very manual to use. You always have to go back in here, adjust the count like this, hold shift and adjust the offset. It can get really finicky and just annoying to use. Fortunately, with HardOps, there is this option called Array V2, and all you have to do is click on it and scroll up to increase the segment count, and move your mouse back and forth to adjust how much the array moves. So really it does the same stuff as a normal modifier. Most of the stuff in HardOps can be done in vanilla. It's simply for the sake of efficiency. This is so much quicker to drop on an array, scroll up or scroll down, and move the mouse and then be done with it, rather than having to go in here and click everything and slide the mouse while dragging the mouse, and it's just a pain really. This is a one-click type of option, and you can do all sorts of things with the array. Now usually when you do an array, you just do static array, but there are some different settings you can look up in here if you press the H key. We'll go through that stuff in a second, but one thing I want to mention is that whenever you run an array, sometimes you want to zoom out, but if you try to zoom out, it simply removes the segment count of the array, which is no good. So if you want to zoom out so you have a better view, you can press the F key, as you can see down here on the bottom. The F key will pause it. Now you can zoom out and pan around and get to the position you want. Press the F key to unpause it, and then you can kind of get back to a better location. So yeah, if you ever find yourself not being in a very practical location, just hit the F key, zoom out a bit, press the F key again, and there you go. Alright, so that's the gist of the array modifier. You can probably figure out the rest, but I do want to mention some other options. So if you press the X key, you can actually swap the axis. So if you want to go along the y-axis, you press X, go along the Z, press X again, and that's basically how you toggle through the different axes here. You just press the X key a few times. One thing I don't like is that whenever you press the X key, the offset will be reset. So if you want to do that without, adjusting, clearing the offset, what you can actually do is press the A key and add in a brand new array. If you wanted, to keep the offset, then add in a brand new array in another direction. So, I can increase the array count here, but the moment I try to swap the axis, it's just going to, reset. So by simply pressing the A key, you can add in a brand new array, press the X key again, and then you'll be able to keep the position of the other one. So you can quickly use this to kind of stack up blocks, get all sorts of different cool array effects, and yeah, just make all sorts of cool stuff with it. I'm going to go ahead and remove these array modifiers, probably a bit too much. There's some other settings in here that I use. Let me just discuss some of the more popular ones. So what you can actually do is press the Alt-A key to remove the active array. So maybe I have like 2 array modifiers, right? If I press Alt-A, it's going to actually remove that most recent array. If you have just a single one, it's not going to do too much for you. But that's a quick way to hide the arrays if that's what you're going for. And just pretty useful stuff. Now, I definitely encourage you to get in here and definitely take a look at the other help menu keys, because there's all sorts of different settings you can use for the array modifier. I simply don't use all of them, and you probably won't either, but there are definitely some cool settings in here you can mess with. Another cool one is the snap option. If you press the S key, you can actually snap based off of grid increments, which is pretty cool. And as you can see, it's even listed in there. So if you forget which key it is, generally it's going to be listed in this help menu. So take a look through the help menu, figure out what settings you're going to end up using the most, and eventually it'll become more intuitive and you won't have to even take a look at the help menu. Alright, so I think that's about it. I've basically shown you all the important stuff for Array v2, and I'm not going to insult your intelligence by going through every single setting in the array modifier when it is simply listed here. You can, I assume you can read and figure out what these other tools do. Most of which you won't use, but like I said, they are here if you ever need them. So that's about it for Array v2. You don't use this one a ton, but whenever you want to add in arrays, it is super useful and quick to use. Alright, so let's discuss the mirror tools in HardOps. So there's an option here if you select a cube or whatever you have in your scene. Select it and press the Q key. You're going to have an option here for mirror and array. I actually never use this button. I find it pretty useless because there's a much easier way to do it. Array v2 we've already discussed, so the array is kind of obsolete here. But if you want to do a mirror, all you have to do is press the Alt-X key and it'll bring up this gizmo right here. So let me add in a cut or two to kind of demonstrate the mirror tool. So maybe, I don't know, something like this. Okay, so if I want to mirror this area to the other side across the y-axis, if you press Alt-X, what you want to do is select the gizmo of the side you're mirroring from, and then it'll mirror to the other side. It's kind of counterintuitive, but basically the side you want to mirror from is the side you're going to click on. Kind of weird to get used to, but you'll pick up on it pretty quickly, at least I did. So that's all you have to do to mirror that way, and maybe if you want to mirror across the x-axis from this side to this side, I'm going to choose this axis right here. So that's what the mirror modifier does. It's super easy to understand, but it's not the only thing that's important. So if you press Alt-X, you're going to also notice we have a big list of different settings in here. The main ones I use are modifier, which is basically just mirror, new modifier, which is basically just a new mirror modifier, so we'll add in an additional one. And we also have the symmetry option. These other ones here in the middle I don't use too much, but I will go over them. So the second one is new modifier. So say I want to add in a brand new mirror modifier. Maybe I want the brand new one to affect, go over the z-axis, so a separate modifier. Instead of going on here and selecting this axis and appending it to the already existing mirror, I could maybe add in a new mirror modifier if there was a reason I wanted to do that. And you're going to also notice these gizmos will also light up, indicating that these aren't being used on the new modifier, which is pretty cool. Now you're going to see we can, do all sorts of cool stuff with that. Basically, that's how you can add in an additional mirror modifier in one click. So mirror is the easy one to understand. Not going to go too much into detail on that one. It's pretty self-explanatory. But the other ones here are kind of confusing. So I'm going to start with symmetry because you'll be using this one probably the second most behind the regular mirror. So symmetry basically works like this. So let me actually just work on, I guess, this side. Okay, so right now this thing is completely non-destructive. So symmetry is not going to actually do anything. If I try to symmetrize to the other side, nothing's going to happen. And that's because we don't have these booleans applied. But check this out. If I apply these booleans here, what symmetry does is it does the same exact thing as mirror, but it mirrors geometry that's applied in the on the actual mesh. So as long as your cuts are applied in our physical geometry and not, live in the modifier stack like this, as long as they're applied, then symmetry will work. So basically what symmetry does is it does the same exact thing as mirror, but it applies a mirror and then applies, it adds a mirror modifier and then applies the mirror right afterwards, is basically what symmetry is doing. And it also adds in an edge right down the middle to indicate the symmetry. So what I could do here is I could either use a simple mirror modifier like this, and then I could, go in and apply the mirror, which is 2 steps. But if I just want to do this in 1 step, so that way the geometry is instantly live, all I'd have to do is come in here, use a symmetry, and now you're going to see I kind of avoid the step of having to go in here and apply the mirror modifier. So they're basically the same thing. This one's just a bit quicker if you're working more destructively. So there's a similar one in here as well. If you press Alt X, there's one here called modifier and apply, which basically does the same thing as symmetry as far as I understand it. Only difference here, let me show you, but let me undo this. So if I were to just run a basic symmetry right now with nothing selected, it's going to symmetrize to this side, right? But if I had this area selected, for example, and I run a symmetry, you're going to see it becomes deselected. The main difference I've seen between symmetry and the modifier and apply option is that they do the exact same thing, but this one retains the selection once you mirror to the other side. So if you use a symmetry, this will become deselected. If you use modifier and apply, these will remain selected. So in case you need to have these selected for whatever reason, I would use modifier and apply instead. So that's about it. And then we of course have bisect and modifier and bisect. So bisect's pretty simple. It just bisects the object, right? That's all it does. Whereas bisect and modifier does this, but it also applies a mirror afterwards. So bisect and modifier is the same as bisect, and then add in a mirror like this. Same thing, but it basically reduces the step. So instead of doing 2 different mirrors, I can just go in here, use bisect and modifier, bisect it, and then apply a mirror. So I don't really use this one at all, but it can be useful depending on the situation. So that's it for the mirror modifier. Like I said, most of the time you're only going to be using the regular mirror option and symmetry. These are the main 2 that I use, but sometimes you might find new modifier and apply to be useful as well. These other 2 I don't really touch too much, so you probably don't need to stress too much about them, but it can be useful depending on the situation. And that's not it for mirror. Mirror does a lot more than you might think. So say for example, let me add in a new cube actually. This one's getting on my nerves. So say we have a cube here, right? And maybe we have some sort of I don't know, maybe we have like a cylinder over here somewhere. So if I want to mirror the cylinder over a specific object, what I can actually do is select the object I want to mirror and then shift click the object I want to mirror over, press Alt X, and then I can run a mirror like that. So that is how you can actually mirror over something. You're going to see all that's really doing is it's applying a mirror and using a mirror object as the one we shift clicked on. So this option is pretty powerful because originally without this option you'd have to go in here, add a mirror, choose the correct axis, and then choose the mirror object. It was just a pain. Now you can just go in here, shift click, Alt X, and you're done. Just way quicker that way. And you can of course do it again. I could do this on the x-axis as well and get the same type of effects, so that's pretty cool. And you can also choose what you want to mirror over. So say for example I had the 3D cursor like over here somewhere, right? I can actually mirror over the 3D cursor if that's what I'm going for. This is kind of a sloppy example. Maybe I'll let me see, maybe I'll put this 3D cursor back in the center. Let me just reset the location. Maybe I'll just move it a bit on the Y. So I can actually mirror over the 3D cursor as well. If you press Alt X, there's a list of advanced settings in here. If you take on this little gizmo option, it'll open up this advanced settings menu. You can change the gizmo and the transform orientation. I don't use this one too much, but it can be useful. The main one I focus on here is you can use the active origin as the mirror point, which is basically mirroring over itself. You can choose the median point, you can choose the cursor, which is right here, and mirror over the cursor, or you can also choose individual origins, but I don't really use that one. The main two you'll be using for mirroring is the cursor option to mirror over the 3D cursor, and the active origin to mirror over the active origin. So, you know, something like this, like we did before. Alt X and then run a mirror like that. So I don't really think you'll ever use median point or individual origins ever when you're doing mirror, but they are there in case you need them. And one other thing, I'll discuss the transform orientation real quick. So let me remove the mirror on this piece and just delete this one out. So if you have a rotated object, right, like this, if you press Alt X, it's going to basically mirror according to the normal orientation. If you want to mirror over that, you just leave it how it is, but if you want to mirror globally, all you have to do is change to the global position and you'll be back to normal. So in the case you ever need to mirror over a static axis, you just change to global. If you want to mirror over the local rotation, you just keep it set to local. These are, like I said, more advanced settings, so you don't really have to leave this turned on unless you're doing some more advanced type of mirrors, but that option is there should you need it. So that's about it. I don't think there's too much left to get into detail on for the mirror. There are, of course, help menus in here should you need to access some more additional settings, but mostly you're not going to be using any of these. So if you need anything else, just press the H key and you'll have all the help that you need. But basically everything presented in this video is all you're ever going to be using. I think the last thing worth mentioning is that whenever you're mirroring, sometimes it's a bit annoying to go in here and select the mirror mode. So what you can actually do is hold the Alt key and scroll up or down to scroll through those, or you could simply press the D key and select it more manually, a bit easier than having to go up here and click the drop down every time. So in the case you're lazy like me and don't like going through these settings either should you need them, you can also press the W key to cycle through the different view orientations, which I don't really ever use. Like I said, I only use local and global. You can also cycle through the different pivot points by pressing the S key. Once again, this is all listed down here should you need it. So that's just a quicker way than clicking the drop down. And yeah, that's basically about it. I'm not going to go through really anything else because I presented just about everything you need for the mirror modifier. So hopefully this video gave you some insight and you have a better understanding of the mirror modifier and how these different settings here work.